can you share with us about refugee hearings?
Well, before the time that the CICC or the immigration actually asked us to get the licensing about immigration and refugee board, I used to practice about the hearing. I was able to represent few of my clients, so I wanted to discuss about the experience that I have gone through during the hearing. Well, that's today. I'm going to make a video about a refugee hearing.
Okay.
And what happens during a refugee hearing. A lot of times I've noticed that the clients that come to see me and want to make a refugee claim in Canada often think that it's only a question of filling paperwork, explaining the story, and then a decision is going to be made by the Canadian government to give them refugee status. A lot of my clients actually don't realize that there is a refugee hearing process in a hearing room at the Refugee Protection Division. Obviously, before it was in person, and now due to COVID-19, most of the time it's virtual. There are some cases where it's mandatory that I have to be in person, or if technology is a little bit complicated or challenging for certain claimants, then the board will recommend that it would be in person. But most of them are virtual, and it's a court proceeding. It's recorded there. Is a board member. A lot of people refer to it as the judge, but given that the Refugee Protection Division is an administered tribunal, the official title, they are the board members. The claimants are present. There's going to be interpreters present if it's required, so in the language of interpretation, and there'll be the representative like me for the claimants, which could either be an immigration consultant like me or an immigration lawyer. Those are the only two types of professionals that are allowed to represent clients at the Immigration Refugee Board, specifically at the Refugee Protection Division. For refugee claims, and in some cases, but this is rare, there might be the Minister's Counsel, which is the party representing immigration. But this tends to happen if there's a reason why they want to intervene. But in most of the cases, the claimants under the interpreter, if one is needed, the representative for the claimant's lawyer, or immigration consultant, and the board members. Some claimants are represent themselves. I think that's pretty rare, but it does happen now. The court hearing, the refugee claim hearing, is being recorded, but it's recorded for different reasons. First, because in the event that there's an issue about during the hearing issue comes up, for example, the claimants feels like they didn't have enough time to explain their story, or they were not asked to write questions, or there was some sort of procedural fairness, some sort of hearing that was not done properly, then that is the way to contest that we have the recording. There's ways to go about if the claimant wants to file an appeal at the Refugee Appeal Division, and the representative needs to review in detail what happened, and if it's a different representative, or even if it's the same representative, by requesting the transcript from the hearing CD from the RPD, then what we could do is we can transcribe them, have them transcribe, and we can have line by line everything that was said by all the parties to be able to make our arguments. The other thing that is important to know about the court hearing is that it's super important to a lot of people. Unfortunately, think that they are going to write their story. People come to Canada for all kinds of reasons. People escape to Canada for all kinds of reasons as well. And some people are genuinely afraid of their lives, but it might not necessarily fit into the definition of convention refugee. There's a lot of guidance, a lot of policies, and there's case law that determines what makes a claimant to be approved to be a convention refugee. Now, a lot of people read online for like forums, blogs. They hear stories about, my friend did that, or I know my cousin walked through the border, made a refugee claim, and it just spread to my other community. Now they're a citizen, super happy, and you know, I hear these things all the time, but it's actually a very difficult claim when you wanted to claim for a refugee claim. And going through the whole process it's actually very complicated process, and it's a complicated process, and everything that you do from the beginning will matter. Everything you say from the moment that you cross the border or you land at the airport and you make your claim. So you came out as a visitor, a few months later you decide to make your claim. Everything you do, everything you write, everything you say in front of an officer will matter, because of you go to a court, all of that information is there. Sometimes the court hearing can be literally 2-3 years later, sometimes 4 years later, and if you forgot what you said, if what you've said was a lie, if you omitted information, then it could be a big problem. So that's why it's very, very important that you know, obviously some people come and you know they're just escaping for their life. They're afraid that they're gonna be, you know, they have death threats, or they're going to be tortured, or they're being discriminated, and or of course maybe they didn't do the whole research. But the hope is that they would fall on a representative, ideally an experienced or immigration representative that will tell them from the very beginning, look, if this is why you're afraid, you need to demonstrate this is you need to have ideally this type of documentation you will have here on the hearing. All these questions will be asked, and we need also to look at your history of what you did after you left your country. Because of, if you were not around, if you went around to different countries, or you went on vacation, or you came to Canada but you made your claim 2 years later, or you wrote story but you forgot important dates, you said you filed the police report and you don't have the report, then you know, if you don't address that from the very beginning, and you leave that at the end when you have your refugee hearing, it's going to play a lot on your credibility. And if there's some things in your story that that are not working, that doesn't make sense to the board member, it's going to be very easy for the board member to say, well, you know, you didn't have this in that document, or this didn't make sense, and during the year when you testified you said the opposite of what you wrote, so I'm going to deny you. So you know, this is not to say that, you know, if you hire an immigration lawyer or immigration consultant, that experience, and you tell them, yes, I have all these documents, yes, this is my mean of necessarily it's going to be approved. It depends. What was your story is what to you. And when I say the word story, you know, it might feel like I'm saying something like an invented story, but the story is what happened to you, right? And unfortunately a lot of people make up stories right there. They hear things, they want a better future from themselves or for their children, and they lie about, you know, something that happened to them, and they come and make a claim, and then years later they have a hearing and they eventually get refused. I would say a lot of them get refused, if not, you know, I wouldn't say most of them, but you know, it's not easy to win a refugee claim. And in a way it should be like that, because this is one of the best countries in the world. Well, you have to agree with that. I think there's legitimate and a little bit real people, vulnerable people that you are that you know fleeing their countries, and it's unfortunate when people come and just make up story, or they make a claim to get a work permit, even though they know their claim is going to be refused, and then applicants who actually claimants who actually deserve are waiting in the line because this is happening. So the hope is that when people enter Canada or they're here, and you know, something happens in their home country and they want to make a claim, the hope is that they fall on somebody that has experience in making these claims, that could listen to their story, got all the information, and say, I think most likely you would have a good chance, or you might have a chance, but it's going to be difficult. Or this does not mean the criteria of making a refugee claim you will most likely be refused. Obviously, as an immigration consultant, we're not allowed to guarantee anything. We cannot say you have 98 chance or you have 50 chance. This is not our job. This is not our profession, and we're actually ethically not allowed to do that. So if you go see a refugee lawyer or an immigration consultant that says, oh yes, this is a slam dunk, I'm going to take the case and for sure you're going to win. Very easy for people to say that, especially that refugee hearing. It could take years to have a hearing. It can take 3, 4, 5 years. So very easy to say that grab your money and then 2, 3 years, 4 years later, you're living in Canada, you're working, and maybe you even have children, and you have your refugee hearing, and you're hearing the judge refuses that. You turn to your consultant or lawyer and say, well, what happened? And they'll be like, well, it's not my fault. I mean, it's the board member that makes the decision. So very, very important to do proper research, to hire somebody or speak to somebody that has experience, because like I said earlier, if you need to demonstrate a lot of things, so first of all, you have to demonstrate that you have a direct risk to your life, risk of death, risk of torture, and of, if it's example, persecution, based on the fact that you are part of a social group or a political group. If can't just be some sort of generalized discrimination, it has to be systematic, repeated discrimination that amounts to persecution. You have to have evidence that you try to go to your government, you try to go to police, you try to get help. It's called state protection, and you weren't given that help. Or if you didn't go because the system is corrupt, police, or you have to be able to explain that. If you ask questions and as your immigration consultant, if that the case that in your country, you absolutely cannot go to authorities. It's our job to pull out country conditions, documentation, international reports that look to this country. You cannot trust that police, okay? That's number 2. Number 3, you have to demonstrate that you don't have an internal flight alternative, or IFA. So this means that, for example, if you are living in India, you have to, and you're from New Delhi, you have to explain why. If somebody wants to hurt you, you are in New Delhi, why can't you go to Bombay, or why can't you go to Mumbai? Why, India is a big country and a lot of people, why can't you go, are not able to relocate somewhere where he is able to hurt you. So that's called an internal flight alternative. So a lot of refugee cases, you will see that the board member will say, yes, I believe you have a risk, yes, I believe the government can help you, but I think you have an internal flight alternative, that you can go somewhere else, safety in your country, because the goal of the Refugee Protection Division is not just to say yes to everybody. If everybody who had problems would come to Canada, it would not be possible. So when people are facing problems in their country, and they have to go through their own government, they have to try to go in another city and live somewhere, and if you didn't do that or couldn't do that, you have to demonstrate why. So for example, a lot of cases where the country is big, and I've had women that have been abused by their husband for years, and they don't want to. So they left the country because they are afraid. And sometimes we know a board member might say, well, you could go live another city, but our argument could be, well, yes and no. Do they speak the language, the dialect of the other cities, if they are a single mom, or if they have mental health issues? How are they going to go and live in another town after they leave this systemic kind of abuse and domestic violence was in their lives for so long? So you know, so long it's, you can just say, well, you just take your children, or you know, it's just you by yourself, go somewhere else. You know, it's certain countries as a single woman living country, living somewhere where you are not, you know, you've never been in, it could be very problematic. So there's a lot of nuances, and there's a lot of different ways to different people have different stories, and have to look at the specific of your cases. So you have these three things that are hopefully an experienced immigration consultant or immigration lawyer can explain to you. The next thing is your documentation. It is very, very important that if you are somewhere now and you're afraid of something's gonna you know, your plan is to come to Canada and make that claim, or if you're in Canada and something happening in your country, what are the documents that support your claim? Obviously, when you're in a state of emergency, you're not going to think, let me collect these documents, let me collect that document. But when you make a refugee claim, in the initial part, you don't necessarily have to have those documents. But what we tell our clients is, look, give us everything you have, whatever you have already, and if you know it's a good document that support your case, we will submit it either as soon as we file it, or 2 months after we file the claim, we'll put it together. But later on, when you're gonna have the refugee claim, 2 years, 1 year later, before that hearing, there's a specific timeline by which we can submit these documents. It's called submitting disclosure documentation. Now, there is time to prepare these documents. But my philosophy at the office has always been, whatever documents you have available now, we want to submit it right away. Why? Because first of all, it shows, it moves towards you having a genuine case, because you have it and you give it. And nowadays, because the RPD, or Refugee Protection Development, is trying to process cases a little bit faster, because there's such a big backlog. If your file is really well prepared, maybe it might be going to, it's called streamline, or streamlining cases that might be approved without a hearing. It's rare, but it happens. But I find overall, if we submit documents from the very beginning and then we update the file later before the hearing, it just kind of shows this credibility. It shows that we're consistent with everything we're saying. Now, having said that, there are, I've done claims where there's a zero document. You know, a woman being abused, for example, a woman actually, a widow actually came here with her family, and her husband was actually killed by somebody, and you know, it's about the political intention. The police, maybe she never went to the doctor. I have a lot of cases where people have no documentation, and the only documentation that we had was the country conditions and the person's story. Because that's also an evidence. You're testifying, so that there's the documents and then there's your testimony, so you know it's not mandatory that you have tons of documentation. But I always tell people, think of everything you can give to us that it will support your case. So if you were harassed by a specific group of people, did they call you? Did they text message you? Did they send you letter? Did you keep a copy letter? Did you keep a screenshot? Don't delete your text messages. Did you send your did they send you messages, messenger? Take a screenshot of that. If you went to the police, get what we need, a copy of the police report. You didn't get a copy, find somebody that's still in your country. Try to go to that call, the police station from here, and say, look, I need a copy of this incident. If you were injured and you went to the hospital, you went to see a doctor, that are medical reports. So people underestimate the amount of documentation and evidences that they can get, and they underestimate that the Refugee Protection Division, or RPD, was these documents. I'm always I shouldn't say the word amazed, but when I know you, when clients I work with, then for the refugees and give them the list of documents, and they are just kind of like, why do you need all of this? Well, it's like so much of documentation that you needed. How are we gonna prove your case if you don't provide us those so many documents that we needed? You have to make your case, or we have to build your case together, and so it should be a teamwork. Some cases, when they don't have the documents, I tell them, look, do you have people that know that such situation, that's so what happened, can they write affidavits? Affidavits, always in affidavit, get them translated and get them certified. Would they be willing to testify over the phone during your hearing? So, you know, we try our best with what we have, but ultimately, if you don't have the right documentation, or not even enough documentation, or even if we have tons of documentation, the next important thing is your testimony when you are going to testify at your refugee hearing. That is when kind of everything comes together, because in your basis of claim, when you are going to be uploading, you know, all the forms, and it's called the narrow, it used to be called the personal information. The personal information form now is the basis of claim form. It's your narrative. That's what the law, we refer to it, your narrative, which is your story. You write it if it's your, on the form. I think it's like one page, when we do it with our clients, depending of the story. Sometimes we end up writing like 4 or 5 pages if there's a lot of details, and if our client remember all the details. But when you go to the hearing, I always tell my client that hearing, this is about you. It's not about me. It's not about the board member. It's not about the interpreter. It's about you, and this is the time for you to really share your story from your heart. Even though maybe you did your narrative by yourself, you didn't put everything, or maybe your representative didn't do a good job. Maybe you don't have the documentation. You were nervous. You didn't know what you didn't prepare for. You hired a lawyer or immigration consultant later, whatever. This is the opportunity to really speak from your heart and explain everything. And unfortunately, with the refugee claims, often it's really, really difficult. I always tell my team at the office, when we have refugee clients, it takes us many months to really actually get to know them. I have an example. I had a client. I thought I've known them already. I've welcomed them in my family's house when they need a place to stay. I've actually jumped above and beyond. Unfortunately, I realized at the end I actually didn't know them. So their story, because people, their story. People that have lived through a lot of trauma and a lot of difficulties, they're in a new country. They are talking to a professional, even though we're very welcoming, very warm. At the end of the day, we are still strangers, and it's always been like that. Where the first meeting we have, I have to ask a question. I get all the information. I'm being a little bit like pushy. They give me some information, but I know a month later my team will be like, hey, you know what? I was talking to this client, and this came up, and how come they didn't tell us in the beginning? I'm like, it's normal. We are strangers. It's hard. They are traumatized. Maybe they don't remember certain things, and my team will tell me, oh, Mary, maybe Mary or John asked some questions. I just wanted to create another name there, and they're crying. It's hard. Can Can you help me? You know, I've seen a lot of my client, they cry. Honestly, they cry just because they want to stay here in Canada as a permanent resident. I'm like, yes, I will help you. And you know, sometimes I'll get on the call and I'll talk to the client myself, and I'll tell them, look, it's unfortunate, it's difficult because they're getting traumatized, but we try to find ways. We try to tell them, look, this is for you, and if you don't tell us everything now, we cannot help you. Once we're in the courtroom, if we get new information, we cannot help you. It's better that we know everything. So we prepare our clients for the hearing. So we do kind of night before the hearing, or maybe one day before the hearing, we do like mock interviews. We ask, because the board member is going to start the hearing, and they're the ones that are asked, you know, going to ask most of the question. It could be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and they're gonna, you know, I've seen refugee hearings. I've been there. I represent 1 or 2 where the board member could be like, I'm very familiar with the fact of this case. I've read everything. I just have a couple of questions, I would say. That's kind of like the exception. Usually they really go like, where were you born? What do you do? And then at some point you see that they're getting you into the details of everything. You know, okay, you said you left this country, you were afraid, but why did you go to Saudi, or why did you go to France for 2 weeks, and then you went to the States, and then you came back? Or okay, you left Israel because this was happening, but you didn't come right away. Why didn't you go to the police? In police station is very important when you are in this kind of situation. And then this is how you know board members will often sometimes very casual, very friendly. They're like, yes, I've read the material, but in fact, like, some of them have read like everything and they already highlighted everything. That's kind of wrong, and they're so kind of testing you. So our job is to, you know, it's not to tell you what to say, because during the hearing we cannot talk in behalf of you. You will gonna directly be the one to talk. That's why we're just at the back. We if I may talk, or I wanted to talk, I have to ask the board member or the counsel of the minister to, if I can talk, okay, I can speak, or maybe I can interpret. But that's why there's an interpreter. So during the hearing, you will gonna be the one to talk a lot, not me. I'm just gonna be there, hoping that whatever I've prepared for you, I've prepared you one night or one day before you are prepared to do so. You know, it's not to tell you what to say. We never do that, because this is your story. This is your life, you know. I always tell clients, you talk from the heart. Our job is to make sure that you are not scared to say certain things, and you feel confident, and you try to remember as many things as possible, and review your history, review what you've written. I always tell clients when I prepare them, don't lie during a hearing, and don't guess if you don't know something. Just say, I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't remember, it's been a very long time. And clients always kind of get like really, because it's like kind of like we want to protect ourselves. It's so obvious that maybe we should lie, or maybe we'll guess something. But I tell them, look, some of these things happened to you 5, 6, 7 years ago, or they happened to you last year, but you are traumatized. You don't remember, or you might not remember on the spot. You are afraid. A lot of our clients have never been in this kind of formal setting. I find now it's a little bit easier because it is virtual, even though sometimes it's not good, because for cases that are very, very difficult, I feel the board member doesn't really feel the pain and doesn't connect. But for a lot of these clients, even whether it's virtual or in person, they've never been in this setting of like an official setting, it's being recorded, it's formal. You know, when things were in hearing were in person, and I would go even in the beginning as a young consultant or as a new immigration consultant, I was intimidated. My chest was actually like pumping, like palpitation is there, but I have no choice. I have to be there during the hearing because I am trying to represent a client, and that client is hoping that I could be able to give not only moral support, but you know, the strength and guide that person. That person is actually depending on my strength. So I have to be strong even though my heart is actually palpitating, or maybe my heart is you know, so nervous, but my hands were like numbing, my hands were like I don't know, it's really difficult. Well, I was also intimidated because everything is so kind of like rigid and structured, and you know, these people are going to decide like your future and your life. You know, it's intimidating. I mean, for me now it's the opposite of intimidating. Like, that's when I feel at my best. I do feel intimidated in the sense that I want to make sure that I don't miss anything, and I'm there for my client. But I can only imagine, you know, these claimants or my clients that have lived through so much, and there's somebody here asking them questions, and some board members are kind of gentle, but sometimes they're not. But some of them are just, you know, as their responsibility or their personalities are kind of rough, and you kind of don't see where they're going, and sometimes they act like they can ask a question where it actually make the client feel really bad. So it's important to be prepared for that. So that's why I prepare my clients, but who will be prepared during the hearing. This is your future. It's your permanent residency that's at stake, even if you messed up. I tell them, look, the board members doing their job, you know, they're trained for this, but they don't know you. They don't know you. They might not even know that much about the country you're coming from, and you know, it happens. Some board members are juniors, you know. Some of them have no idea where certain countries are. Maybe they read about it before, so it's up to you to share your story, to tell them what's like in your country, what is like in your culture. And then add to that, if there's an interpreter. I have also an experience with an interpreter who doesn't have any idea what the claimant or what my client are saying and putting it into English. So from Tagalog, our language is Tagalog, to English, that interpreter actually messed up. So of course, the board members doesn't know. They have no idea what's the right words in there, and I can't talk. I'm not the interpreter. I'm the counsel. And again, the claimant doesn't have any idea what the interpreter was saying also. So when there's an interpreter also, the hearing is always 2-3 times longer, and sometimes interpretation doesn't flow very well because you got to do short sentences, then the interpreter has to translate, and you know, things can get lost in translation. So it's important to be prepared for the hearing. When you apply and you requested a translator, it's the immigration or IRCC or the refugee board who will gonna actually provide you that interpreter. You cannot choose. So there is a lot. There's this hearing, a lot that comes with that. So so that's why we spend a lot of time explaining to our clients what's going to happen during the hearing. I have also one hearing where the claimant or my client was actually trying to read something, even the name, because he is so like nervous. You can see his hands shaking. And then the member said, you can't read. You have to say it without reading. They want to see if you're genuine in talking about those things. So my client removed the note and he has to talk on his own. I can't even talk there. So it's really important that you have to actually be prepared. But again, as what I've said, who will be prepared during this kind of situation? If you don't remember something, you know, don't guess, don't lie, but also say, I'm sorry, it was long time ago, I don't remember, I think it was in the summer, I think it was just in the winter, sorry, I just don't remember, I've never had a board member. Be like how you come, you don't remember, you know. And obviously if it's like an important, significant date, it might look a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you don't remember, I always tell them, just be honest, straightforward. Board members want to see like the people that are straightforward, honest, and even when you do all that, it doesn't necessarily mean your claim is going to be approved. It's going to depend on all the evidences. You could be a very nice person, you're a very good person, you could have lived to a lot of things, but doesn't mean your refugee claim is going to be refused. It really depends if it's a direct risk, if you try to get the help from your government, and if you don't have an internal flight alternative or IFA and have then the direct risk, and depend on your evidence, right? So, you know, I've had clients come and tell me, oh, I'm from the island and I got a bunch of threats and I want to make okay, who threatened you? Do you did you go for, do you have any evidence? I don't have anything. They would say that I don't have, you know, so it could be true, but how are we going to prove it right? So in those cases, I thought people that I would do everything. You're telling me now, I don't think the chances are very good. And you know, as immigration counsel, it's a little bit, it's hard because we're accompanying people in their refugee claims. We're not telling the story for them, so we can only do what we have. So you know, sometimes I have to tell people, look, tell me a little bit more, like, why did you come here? What's going on? And sometimes when we dig a little deeper, we're like, okay, so you really came here because you want a better life for your children. And you know, where you were, it was corrupt. The economy, it was a corrupt economy, it wasn't good. So I have to explain to them, look, these are not grounds for refugee claims. Maybe there's other options. Did you think about studying? Did you think about immigrating? And sometimes if they've been in Canada for a long time and they are established, they have minor children. Maybe it's a humanitarian compassionate, and it's important to know. One thing for sure, I also have filed for humanitarian and compassionate grounds, and I've had, you know, successful cases that I've handled. It is important to know that, you know, a lot of people kind of just jump in and make these refugee claims, because when you make a refugee claim, they can't send you back right away. You get a removal order that it's not enforceable, but you can stay. You get a work permit, an open work permit, a medical privileges. Your kids can study. You can get a financial assistance from the government. And there's, you know, this isn't always, since I started practicing, people about this, and then they're like, well, yeah, I wanted to work, I make a refugee claim, but then what happens if your refugee claim is refused? And now, what do you do to your removal order? That's another case that I have to handle. Is now enforceable. They can deport you from Canada. You know, it doesn't matter if you have children or not. You know, it could be very, very complicated, and people don't realize, oh well, why are they going to kick me out? How now I have a valid work permit for my refugee claim? But okay, you have that, but that doesn't mean that CBSA cannot remove you. A lot of people don't understand, or they don't actually listen, but it's very overwhelming. They apply for refugee claim, they get all this documentation, removal order, this deportation, or all this stuff that says if this happens, this will be this. We're talking your passport, you know, it says everywhere, if you're refused, you will be asked to leave, but nobody really reads the fine print. Remember, if you're filing for a refugee claim, the original passport will be taken from them. They will gonna give you a Xerox copy or a recopy of your passport. So you can't travel. Not unless you can still travel, you want to travel, you have to withdraw your refugee status, and then also, of course, you can actually get back your original passport. And I'm sure officers are probably saying that the people, but you know, people have traveled there, they have children, they're you know, they don't understand, so they make a refugee claim sometimes really like just like, I just want to work from it. And then when they come and see me, they're like, okay, now I've done humanitarian compassionate application because I've been here 5 years, but the officer says that it was refused because I'm not credible, that I understand why, because officers don't like when there's this immigration history. When they have seen people try to do everything to stay here, when they don't have grounds for it, right? So they, you know, officers are like, okay, you made a refugee claim and it was a fake story. It was a fake story. Now you did an agency, it's based on something else, doesn't match what you said in your refugee claim. So, you know, it's, and you don't want to get a point where your immigration history is long and complex, that sometimes I feel officers are now just punishing the clients. They're saying, no, we don't want this type of person in Canada, you know. So that's why I tell people, you know, you have to think really, really long and carefully before you make an immigration application, because everything stays in the system. You know, some people will tell me like, oh, I applied for a visitor visa and I put this information, I got refused, and now I'm gonna apply and say something else. And it's like, okay, but you know that all that information stays in the system, and they're going to look at that, and everything you do in the future is going to be based on that future. And they're like, oh really? They know. Yes, they know. So you know, all this to say that you know a refugee hearing is complicated. A refugee claim is very complicated, and it's really, really expensive as well. It is important to get proper advice before filing it, and if you filed it and you didn't get the proper advice, consult with somebody who knows. Sometimes I've counseled clients to say, look, you should have never done a refugee claim. You should withdraw this. But they're going to ask me to leave. Yes, maybe there's something else we can do for you, or maybe you should withdraw and leave and try to come back, because if you don't just keep going and abusing the resources of the government, well, Canadian government, and the system, it's going to end. Well, if it's not a genuine claim, don't make the claim. And unfortunately, some people don't you know, a lot of people think like, you know, it's funny. They come in my office and they're like, yeah, I'm here from, you know, that country, and I don't want to go back. Okay, are you afraid to go back? Yes. And they're like, okay, why? Well, you know, there's no job, and you know, it's not safe. It's like, oh, okay, well, this is not a refugee claim. Like, tell me more about your story. And then, you know, sometimes we dig and then something will come up, and I'll say, okay, so this is why you left, so this might be, but on the other hand, it could also be, okay, no, this is not, you know, you don't qualify, you're for refugee, you know, let's look at the everything else in your life. Maybe there's another way. Maybe you have qualification, another category. If there isn't, I have to tell you, it's better to leave.
There you go, counsels. I hope you got something from this video, especially when you are representing a claimant or a client about their refugee claims in Canada. All the best.